I'd say there's a difference between toxic and traditional masculinity.
Mm.
And to me, where I draw that line is it becomes toxic if I start to push my ideas on someone else to the point that I bully them into they have to think my way or they have to do it my way.
Mm.
That's when anything to me can become toxic, right? I can have all the beliefs and ideas I want on my own, but they aren't toxic to someone else unless I'm trying to force it on them.
Yeah. So is the view that masculinity, so the view is masculinity in and of itself is not inherently good or bad. It's not toxic or not. It's just what it is. And then it's what we as individuals choose to do with it. We can make it positive or we can make it toxic. Yes. That's the view.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's getting us to go back, I mean, all those things that you hear, it's like when somebody says to a little boy, be a big man, be a big guy. What does that mean? And I ask on the other side, when somebody says to a little girl, act like a lady, what are they saying? What is all the piles of stuff that come with those?
Yeah.
And it really depends on who's saying it, right? Of course, there's perspective and context according to who's saying it, but there's a lot of layers. Usually they're saying that to you because they think you're not living up to something.
Right. Well, let's get into that nuance for a second, because I think that's really interesting. I think that the idea that, like, if masculinity is a thing, right? That is something that, as we said, it's not good or bad. It just is what it is. What is it? Like, how would we define masculinity? Because I think you're right. There's times in which somebody says, hey, be more of a man or man up or whatever it is. And I think a lot of people view that and say, hey, that's bad. People should just be what they are. If they are more vulnerable or more timid or more sensitive or whatever it is, that doesn't necessarily mean they are a man or a woman or whatever. It's just who they are.
Right.
So what is masculinity and what is its, let me put it this way, like, what is its function in the world? And we could say the same thing about femininity too, but we'll talk about masculinity. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've been asking that question. So I've run this group since I got this idea, this men's group, for 3 years now. And we've been putting that question out there. What is masculinity? What does it mean? And it's so funny because every time somebody tries to pose a response to that, somebody else will debunk it. Because a lot of the guys will throw things out there like the traditional, masculinity means you're more mechanical, you're more mechanically minded, or you're more, athletic. Well, and then so somebody, for instance, says you're more athletic, then somebody says, well, what about Serena Williams? Or what I mean? What I mean? There's always something that can debunk that on the other side if you're just looking at the binary, right? But one of the things we end up talking about is there's a huge spectrum of masculinity. And like you were saying, it's fine to be this way or that way. I mean, you've got from The Rock and Rocky Balboa to Fred Rogers. Those are very different types of masculinity.
But still masculinity.
Right? Yeah.
So what is the essence though? What is it? Is it scientific? Like, is there a scientific nature to say masculinity is that? Like, what is the essence of it that makes up that it's even on that spectrum?
Yeah, I think it's who we feel we are inside. I think we even feel, because there's a difference between your sex at birth and how you feel inside, right? Because as we know, some people, feel more masculine that were born female, and some people feel more feminine that were born, sex at birth, male. And so it's more of who you feel you are inside. And now that is greatly affected by our socialization.
Well, that's exactly where I was going to go. I wonder, and again, I'm just thinking out loud. Obviously, I'm curious your take on it. And I think some people make this argument, right? The terminology becomes problematic because by saying that masculinity is a thing, it implies that when I try and categorize myself and what I feel, I need to say, is it masculine or is it not? Is the problem with that word, right? We are just people. And some people are more athletic or more aggressive or whatever, and some people aren't. So should we get rid of masculinity altogether as a topic, as a concept?
Well, that's a good question. And maybe one day we'll get to where we just have this huge gender spectrum. That's the hope. I wrote this because I want people to move forward, and I realize right now we definitely have masculinity and femininity. So I have to work within where we are,
Yeah.
But the world has pretty much come to understanding a spectrum of sexuality. understanding that it's not just gay or straight, that there's, the 50 shades of
Right.
everything in between, right? And I think one day we'll have that understanding with gender, that it's all over the map. I mean, just take that, for instance, Rocky Balboa and Fred Rogers. And I mean, there's such different types of masculinity. It's like night and day, right? And we could do the same thing on the feminine side. You could take a very femme woman and you take, take Ronda Rousey, the fighter, and it's very different, right?
Yep.
Yeah.